but the oppressor has positioned him or herself in a way that says, well, everything's fine now, just kind of keep going about your life. We were at a very different point back then. We were at the point where the onion had been peeled back, our eyes had been opened, and those of us that were unafraid were going to fight till the death. We're at a very different place in history. So there was nothing you could tell me back then, other than the fact, watch your back. Well, I was already watching my back. I didn't know that my bodyguard was an informant, was a police informant. I wish I had known that, but there was no way. I had to go through those historical moments. So there's no redoing of history. What occurred, what happened, occurred. I think what I'd like to tell young people today is
Chicago, Chicago, that toddling town, Chicago, Chicago, I'll show you around.
The corner was our magic, our music, our politics. Fires raised as tribal dances and war cries broke out on different corners. Power to the people.
And just say Shot City. If you don't know by now, I'm talking about Shot Town. And just say Shot City, Shot City.
It was like the life being snatched from Emmett Till was very influential. And then the life being snatched from young Bobby Hutton. I don't even want to call him little because he's very influential. His spirit's very influential. That being snatched, it really, I just met another activist here in Chicago who's actually from California, who's doing work in juvenile halls. Her name is Valerie Goodlow. And she was talking about how a lot of people don't understand how it is for Black people to wake up every morning and not know what your life is going to be. You're worried about your life. Every day you're worried about your survival. And for you to see those young Black boys like you have their life snatched away so early, I mean, that's a motivator for, okay, we have to do something to stand up for our survival because the system is directly opposed. It's ready to chew us up for what it needs.
It was a, for me personally, it was a pivotal moment. And, Huey wrote a book, To Die for the People. And people nowadays don't really understand literally what that meant. Because, and neither did most of the people that jumped into the Black Panther Party.
Right.
Because when we got back to Seattle, Bobby told us to come back to Seattle and he'd be up here to organize our chapter. And when he came and was laying down the rules of the Black Panther Party, my mother recalls her and my dad come home from work, and all of these bodies are in the living room and dining room listening to Bobby, and they step over the bodies and go back to the kitchen and close the doors and leave us alone, let us do our thing. And Bobby went through the rules of the Black Panther Party. And I remember him saying, we need two things. He said, one, you need to read 2 hours a day, and you need to go to PE classes twice a week, political education, because we had to prepare ourselves to understand the building of a revolutionary movement and what it meant and what it took. And the second thing he said was, you need 2 weapons and 1,000 rounds of ammunition, because anytime you go up against one of the biggest bullies in history, they're going to come after you. This is what happened to little Bobby. They're going to come after you. So we got that message, and connecting that message, and from what I saw little Bobby lying in the coffin, I understood that it meant death at any moment. Most people that got into the party didn't understand that. So it didn't happen to everyone. We had 300 to 400 people come out of the community overnight to join the party. Most of them would be expelled before a year was up. Most of them were rally Panthers. the glory of standing up and wearing the uniform. That would wear off soon once they realized that they had to learn
serious.
They had to learn how serious it was, the discipline of the Black Panther Party, and that we were not playing around. This was not a game. And so, I was appointed the field lieutenant, which we had initially called it the deputy field marshal. Aaron became the captain, and Bobby said, "Who's going to run this thing?" And everybody looked at my brother.
Okay.
And so that's how he became the captain.
Okay.
But we had already been infiltrated at that point and didn't realize it. See, J. Edgar, he had already started putting, and the people out there putting the word out, however it happened, but we didn't realize it. And all the chapters, that followed, we were the first chapter. Bobby left Seattle and started setting up chapters all the way across the country. Chicago was on that list, Kansas City, Detroit, 40 chapters within the next couple of weeks.
Wow.
It all launched after that. But every chapter had the same problem. And that is, we were new to this revolutionary thing. We had to learn what it took to build a revolutionary movement. We were going to make some mistakes. There were no cell phones. There were no computers. There was no way to do background checks other than to say, right, who knows this brother? Who knows this sister? Who could speak up? They had to fill out an application. We filled it out. Who knows who can vouch for this person? That kind of went like that as we were building. And of course, undesirables got within our ranks because they saw it as an opportunity to stand up or to go rob something or to go, it was like organized chaos that we were trying to figure out as we were trying to build the organization. But eventually we, as we went through, those next few months, very quickly, we organized our first survival program. Huey said that Black people can't survive the conditions within Black America without, some way to survive. So the very first program that the party started back in '67, which drew the attention of the FBI, was the Police Alert Patrol, where we patrolled the cops with shotguns and a law book. But he thought that J. Edgar Hoover thought that they could contain that. But as soon as Seattle started and we moved across the country, we had a Police Alert Patrol in Seattle. So that summer, J. Edgar Hoover named the Black Panther Party the #1 threat to the internal security of the United States. And you had mentioned earlier about the Seattle chapter, and other chapters. No, unbeknownst to us, Hoover had designated 3 cities for initial elimination: Chicago, LA, and Seattle.
Oh, wow.
Seattle in the summer of '68 had the 2nd highest sniper rate in the country. If not the 1st or 2nd highest bombing rate in the country. And this was not just Black people doing the bombing, because we had white radicals up here that was crazy.
Yes.
They were blowing shit up everywhere.
That's what Seattle's known for, really.
Yeah, so Seattle was a volatile spot, and they saw the Black Panther Party as a lightning rod. And so we were designated early on for elimination. But see, Bobby had warned us that they're going to come after you. So we had bodyguards, and my mother used to told us these stories that in the middle of the night she'd get a call because her and my dad, the phone was on her side of the bed, so she would answer the phone, and someone would say, "We're gonna come and kill those nigger sons of yours," and she'd say, "Go ahead and try." Go ahead, try. Because she knew that something had shifted. That we could handle ourselves. And so my parents were always supportive.
Nice.
But we had now moved into a totally different era. And you talk about dying at any particular moment. Anytime we stepped out of the house, we could be dead. But as a now, I was 17 at the time, 18 within a month. 18-year-old, we had no fear. You know, I used to carry a weapon under each arm. When I went out into the street, it was like, come and get me, because it's going to be a death fight. That was the mentality that we had when we went into the streets. And well, certainly when we were on police alert patrol, 6 of us packed into a car, shotguns, law books, armed to the teeth. We were not afraid. We were fearless.
Yeah.
Because those were what the times called for.
Right.
This was at the beginning of building a revolutionary movement. And so that's how we went about organizing and working in the community. We had a 10-10-10 plan, which Bobby had laid out. And so we were going to go block by block, throughout the community and begin to organize. And that's what was in front of us.
And how really was that taking place? How was Bobby funding going around the country and establishing these things? You guys funding the? We
always had one of the people that we saw down at the rally, at Little Bobby's funeral, up on the stage with Chairman Bobby, was I recognized the dude. I remember when I saw him. I knew who that is. It was Marlon Brando.
Oh wow!
And white liberals always came from the very beginning in support of the Black Panther Party. Jane Fonda and other white liberals and rich folks out of the Berkeley Hills. And so funding, in terms of our activities, some of the things that we were doing, there were rich white liberals here in Seattle that gave us money.
Wow.
That we could use to organize with. And then of course we began to sell the Black Panther paper. And so, we found a way to find resources within our community. They came to us. They just came to us, we had lawyers, to represent us, because that summer of '68, I was probably arrested 13, 14 times.
Wow.
But none of the charges ever stuck. And so the mechanism for building this revolutionary movement was there, because the radicals were sympathetic to the struggle. And while we wouldn't let them join the Black Panther Party, we told them, you can go fight within the white community because you need to organize there. But we always had that support. I remember a student at the University of Washington, must have been from a wealthy family, gave us a car. He said, hey, y'all can just have this car. Wow. And we just got stuff like that because we were sympathetic to the movement. That allowed us to do our thing. So that's how that happened.
But you also, there was at some point where the movement, I think it was back in maybe the 70s, where you did move away from Black nationalism and you kind of opened up to more cultural diversity.
We were never cultural nationalists. That was Ron Karenga and groups like them. Ron Karenga was a police agent. He's still lecturing on campus at UCLA. He was he's a confessed police informant.
Right. And
is responsible for the murder of at least 5 Panthers. And his payment was Kwanzaa. And
we covered the origins of Kwanzaa on the earlier episode.
Yeah.
And we still get a lot of
flack from that. But please go ahead.
So we were never that. Black nationalism was a base of building the revolutionary movement, but we'd always had a philosophy of building a movement for all oppressed people, always from the beginning. Because we had, in fact, we had one of our members who we accepted in our ranks was a brother by the name of Mike Tagawa, and he's still alive today. He's one of the original Panthers from Seattle, because we grew up with, as I said, we grew up with these, you know, Japanese and Chinese and Filipino. We grew up with them. But a lot of the people that came into the party had this black nationalism concept and didn't understand the fact of building this rainbow coalition. And so we had to, you know, that's why PE classes were so important, was to educate people around the need to build this rainbow coalition. When Fred Hampton coined that phrase, you have to remember, Deputy Chairman Fred was murdered in December of 1969. He was putting out that message early in 69. This was before the 70s. So it wasn't no shift in the 70s. This was happening early on, was that we needed to build a revolutionary movement that included all oppressed people. That had been always part of our philosophy. But we had to start in the black community. We had to build our movement with black people in the black community, and then begin to understand the broadness of how this struggle was going to unfold. Huey talked about early on that, you know, with the racism in this country, we can't fight racism with racism. You know, we had to embrace other people who had been oppressed. So Huey had put that out very early. And so we knew that this had to happen. But we also knew that in order to capture the hearts and minds of the people in the black community, they had to know that we were for them. That we were building this movement in the black community, and we were the vanguard for the black community. And along the way, we would pick up allies. So, you know, it was a movement that had to develop, and it became more apparent as we went through these growth spurts. And, you know, like I said, most of those 300, 400 Panthers that had joined in the summer of '68, many of them were out. I was also, as head of security, I was head of the goon squad, and which was enforcing the rules of the party. One of the rules of the Black Panther Party was you can't disrespect or abuse women. And so these brothers were out slapping women around, and, you know, wearing the uniform to kind of act as, you know, almost like they were pimps or something. And so I can't tell you the number of, when I took my goon squad out, the number of brothers who ended up with the boot upside their head because they had been disrespecting women. And so, and some of the Panthers across the country, they were robbing banks in broad daylight with uniforms on. Some of them were agent provocateurs. Others were people that were caught up into that. You know, this is what we're supposed to do: go rob the man, and you know, with no revolutionary philosophy. Right. In the start of '69, Huey said, "Order the purge from prison. You have to purge your ranks." And most of those rally Panthers were purged early on. You know, if you didn't show up, if you weren't disciplined, if you didn't read, study, and learn, so we could do organized struggle in the community, you were just jiving around, and we ain't got time for that. And so most of those people were, but that was really when we were at our most effective, was when we got rid of the junk weight. Right. We had a serious core group of revolutionaries that we knew that we could count on to do organizing in the community. That's when we were at our most effective.
And what year did you say that was?
That was '69 when we purged them.
Okay.
'69, yeah.
And what year did you all start to have ties with other revolutionary groups, even in other countries, where they were consulting?
That started pretty early on, because the you have to remember that Eldridge, who was crazy, he was a crazy dude. He fled the country, and in '68, because he had already been in prison, and that he knew that he couldn't beat this rap, so he exiled and opened up the international office of the Black Panther Party in Algeria. Okay. And see, the word of revolutionaries in the United States standing up against the system spread very quickly. We had some brothers and sisters in London, formed a chapter in London. Some brothers and sisters down in far away as New Zealand, and also in Sydney, Australia. Started a chapter of the Black Panther Party in New Zealand and in Australia. The Polynesian Panthers, as they came to be known as. I later found out, years later, how far-reaching our influence was when I was speaking just a couple of years ago in the UK, in Birmingham, UK. Places, Birmingham, UK. And I was speaking at Birmingham City College, Birmingham City University. And the audience was mixed audience, a huge audience, and I talked for almost 2 hours, and afterwards, I remember these 5 or 6 young black women came down, and they were young sisters, and they said, "We're ready to start a revolution now." And then these other 2 brothers, they brought their mother down to introduce her, and they said that their mother, they were from South Africa. Their mother had fought with Stephen Biko, and they said, but she doesn't like to talk about that. She's shy. And when I got a chance to speak to her, I said, you know, that's not something you should be ashamed or shy about. That's something that you should be proud of. And she said to me, well, it was the Black Panther Party that made Stephen Biko fight in the first place.
Oh, wow.
So that's how far-reaching the Black Panther Party was. Stephen Biko was inspired by the Black Panther Party to stand up and fight back in South Africa.
Wow.
So the reach of the Black Panther Party was global early on. Early on in 68, 69, people had heard about us standing up against American fascism and imperialism right within our own country and facing down pigs in the streets and not allowing them to, because we had our own system of apartheid here in the US, you see, and we were standing up against that. So we inspired revolutionary movements in different parts of the world.
Right.
And so it was early on. People recognized that if you had somebody in the belly of the beast that was standing up, so, that was inspiration. So we had we inspired other movements around the world.
And so in looking at the influence you guys had, how far it went, how fast it went, how kind of strong the movement was, or do you have any stories about some of the influential points that came along that kind of hurt the Black Panther movement and the progress, even to kind of stopping the progress on the official level, even though, you know, it's clear that it influenced many movements grew out of it?
Yeah, the thing that people need to remember and understand, even while it was happening, because things were happening so fast as we were organizing and trying to build this movement in the streets, is that the oppressor is very good at his most critical tactic, which is divide and conquer. That's the tactic that the oppressor has used from the very beginning. Over and over and over again, we've fallen victim to that tactic. It happened during slavery, you know, pitting us against one another because of the shades, different colors, shades of our skin. The house Negro, the field Negro, and so the oppressor was very good at that, and has always been very good at that. So through the infiltrations and through sowing distrust in the community and even within the party, through infiltrators, through agent provocateurs, this was the thing that plagued the party the most. My brother Aaron had a $25,000 bounty, we found out years later, on his head. And one of the chief architects of that was our brother-in-law, who had put himself in the role as co-chairman. He said, well, I'm the co-chair. Well, nobody appointed him the co-chair. He kind of appointed himself there. But he orchestrated an event where my brother was supposed to be shot in the streets, but Aaron was able to elude it. But Aaron says that haunts him to this day, and it's a part of his emotional stress, his post-traumatic stress, PTSD. The number of times that assassination attempts against him, and I had some against me. We found out that my bodyguard was a police agent, which orchestrated the event that put me in prison. And he had another incident where I used to run most of the gun training classes, but I don't know where I was on this particular day where they were out in we had our own gun range that we had created, and they were out there doing target practice, and the shotgun that he was testing out that afternoon, he started to put it up to his shoulder, but he remembered to shoot a shotgun from the hip, not from the head, from the shoulder. I had experience with weapons and told people, we're not shooting birds. You don't put a shotgun up to your shoulder. It's always fired from the hip because it's meant as a backup weapon. So he fired it from the hip, and it exploded. Someone had planted explosive in his shotgun shells and got him into his shotgun. And it exploded and almost tore his arm off. If it fired it from the shoulder, it would have killed him. And so there were these attempts on his life in particular. I had a few attempts on mine, but he and I were supposed to be assassinated in the woods one evening, and a guy from a motorcycle gang had come up to our office and said he needed to warn us. So we went out, and of course we were armed when we went out and met him outside of the office, and he told us that he and some other motorcycle members were supposed to approach us and tell us that they had machine guns that they wanted to sell us, and that when we went out into the woods wherever to pick up these machine guns, we were to be assassinated at that point. He said, so I'm warning you ahead of time, if these other dudes come, that's what that's about.
Wow.
So these things were happening, but so it was outside people that were trying to kill us. We had infiltrators on the inside that were doing crazy things in the party, and so these were some of the things that began to erode the trust within the party. But it was always about divide and conquer. This thing, see, Fred, Deputy Chairman Fred was brokering a truce between the gangster disciples and the Blackstone Rangers. Well, and see, Hoover saw that as a threat. And so he knew he had to eliminate Fred early on, which is why he used who was Fred's bodyguard, head of security, to set Fred up for murder. You know the story of how he drew the diagram of the apartment and where Fred slept and all of that. That was premeditated murder that no one stood trial for. And before then, I mentioned the 3 cities. Before then, they had gone to LA in January of '69 and using Karinga, and murdered Bunchy Carter and John Huggins on the campus of UCLA, shot him in the back. And this was orchestrated through Karinga. And of course, what the FBI wanted was us to take retaliation. I was at Bunchy and John's funeral. My brother and I and members of the Park Seattle chapter, we were down there at Bunchy and John's funeral. And we wanted to we wanted to attack the motherfuckers, but we were told not to, because this would play into the hands of the FBI.
By the leadership of the party.
Yeah. We were told, no, we're not going to do that because that's what they want. They want a street fight between his organization, United Slaves, and the Black Panther Party. This is the divide and conquer tactic that they were trying to employ. It was through the deaths, because of the deaths of Bunchy and John, and then later the brother that was replaced Bunchy as the head of the Southern California chapter was a good close comrade of mine by the name of Elmer Geronimo Pratt. And G was framed up for allegedly murdering two white folks playing tennis on tennis courts in LA. And he was framed up and got life in prison, of which he spent 25 years in prison before Johnny Cochran got the charges thrown out. There was a show that I saw in the 80s where they were interviewing an HBO special, and they were interviewing the head of the Crips, and from prison, because he was in prison at that point. And he said that when the leadership of the Black Panther Party was wiped out of the Southern California chapter, the gang splintered. See, Bunchy had been head of one of the largest gangs in Southern California, the Slossons. And it was brokered truce between the other large gangs in Southern California when they murdered Bunchy. And so the gang splintered because the party leadership was no longer there. And he said one Saturday night in the rail yards that run through Watts, that trains came and just stopped and stayed there. And he said that was unusual because he knew that the people that in the rail yards knew that if there were train cars there with like TVs or couches, that the young brothers and sisters would get in there and get them a TV or a couch. So they were usually empty. And he said that night they went in to see if anything was in the cars. He said that every kind of weapon that you wanted was in that first set of cars. And the second set of cars was all the ammunition for them. So they were arming the gang members, and while at the same time they were flooding the community with drugs, with crack. And so they basically launched the drug wars that continued to cripple our community today, 40 years later. And so people don't realize where that came from. And that same scene was played out in cities across the country, in Chicago, in Detroit, in these large cities where they get arm these young brothers and sisters with weapons, flood the community with drugs, and they launch these gang wars. And so this was all because of this divide and conquer tactic. So this was how this began the erosion of the Black Panther Party from the inside, unbeknownst to us, as we were trying to fight this struggle and build a revolutionary movement. There were always these playbooks,
the tactics,
these counter-revolutionaries and agents among us. And so that's the lesson. That's one of the lessons that young people need to learn as they're organizing, is the divide and conquer will always be there, and you need to be aware of who you are organizing with, and be aware of how that can happen.
One of the key points that we want to be able to draw from you, from your knowledge, from your wisdom, from the history, is how you would navigate in these political times, in this environment. What advice would you give to young organizers, young movements?
Yeah, one of the things that I never do is second guess what we did back then. Because my 18-year-old self wouldn't listen.
Like your mom knew. Like your mom knew.
It wouldn't. My 18-year-old self wouldn't listen to a 74-year-old man. I'm 74 now, and so I think that you have to understand that as these things are unfolding, what was going on in America at the time was very different than what's going on today.
Yeah.
The history, this trail of atrocities, from slavery, and even obviously before slavery, but the following slavery, the Reconstruction, the continued oppression of Black people, the burning of Black Wall Street, and other such atrocities that were going unchecked across this country. It was, you know, this so-called great nation was building and growing. Atrocities were being committed all along the way. And of course, you know, patriots today, you know, when I say patriots, I mean primarily white and black, you know, say, you know, you got to let go of that. That happened then. This is what's now. Well, you know, once your eyes are open and the reality comes into focus, you know, somebody's got to atone for what happened. It's just like the brutality that's happening in Gaza right now, where Israel is unchecked. You know, in terms of how they're murdering people. Well, we got to defend ourselves. Well, for the first place, you invaded somebody else's land and took over and set up his country, and you know, and confined them and created apartheid. So, you know, what do you expect people to do when they're trying to fight back for their freedom? So, when you think about the history of the U.S. and what happened to Native people, what happened, you know, Africans were here before Columbus, and you know, all of us know that. But the oppressor has positioned him or herself in a way that says, well, everything's fine now, you know, just kind of keep going about your life. We were at a very different point back then. We were at the point where the onion had been peeled back, our eyes had been opened, and those of us that were unafraid were going to fight till the death. We're at a very different place in history. So there was nothing you could tell me back then, you know, other than the fact, you know, watch your back. Well, I was already watching my back. I didn't know that my bodyguard was an informant, was a police informant. You know, I wish I had known that, but there was no way. You know, I had to go through those historical moments. So there's no redoing of history. You know, what occurred, what happened, occurred. I think what I'd like to tell young people today is learn from the mistakes and the successes of the Black Panther Party. One thing that we could not, that a true core Black Panther would not do is sell out, because we had principles and we lived by those principles. And these core members of the Black Panther Party, they were like our brothers and sisters, literally. They were our family. And so we would not sell out to, you know, someone with money or someone with whatever. The community knew that we could not be bought off. You know, anybody that was accepting some money or accepting this or accepting that, they were people that they knew could be bought. They could not do that with members of the Black Panther Party. You couldn't offer me $10,000 or $100,000. You know, if you did, you know, it goes into the breakfast program and the free medical clinic, because we were not about personal gain. We were about serving the community. So I think, you know, the advice is for young people today, and you're building a movement, is you have to understand what it is you're fighting for and what you're willing to sacrifice. You know, and you have to look at the conditions today and begin to develop a strategy that, you know, you can't do the whole thing. You know, you change the world. We thought we were going to change the world. You know, we weren't going to change the world. We could have influence in different parts of the world and different parts of the globe, but you have to find something that you can focus on that builds, you know, momentum for what's coming next. What I do with my life today, and I know many former Panthers do the same thing, is I'm dedicated to young people. You know, and I mean, when I say young, you know, all ages, but the age group that gives me the most energy and excitement. I'm blessed that there are elementary schools that bring me in to talk to kids from the grades K through 5. It's that is something that I hold dear. And it's interesting because these are white and black kids, Asian kids, of all races. That when I go to the elementary schools, I tell the teachers to first educate them on the Black Panther Party. because there's basic information you can educate them on. There's a lot on the Seattle chapter. There's a lot on other chapters, but educate them on the Black Panther Party, the 10-point program, et cetera, our survival programs, et cetera, because we were not a social service agency. These were survival pending revolution.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time I get in front of these kids, they're asking me questions.
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget the first question out of this little second grader over in Bellevue, Washington, which is over across the lake.
Mm-hmm.
And, next door, Bellevue's next door to Redmond, next door to where Microsoft was born. And I'm in a white elementary school, and I got all these second and third graders sitting on the floor, and this little blonde, blue-eyed kid, first question, and with so much excitement pent up in his little body, he said, "What was it like being on the police alert patrol?"
Mm.
And to have, it kind of blew me away. To have this kid understand the importance of holding police responsible. It's one thing to have officer friendly in the classroom, and I believe most cops are good cops. But the ones that get into the ranks that want to do harm, somebody's got to put them in check and hold them responsible. And this little kid understood that, and so these kids understand, at that age, when their minds are untainted, about the need. This is what I try to pass on to them: the need to stand up and be aware of what's going on around you. See, these radical right-wing Republicans who say that a wokeism is bad. They call it a wokeism.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, it's a wokeism. Like being a woke is a bad thing. What a woke is bad for people that are trying to hide the truth. That's who it's bad for.
Yeah.
You look up a woke in the dictionary, it says being aware of yourself and being aware of your surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell is wrong with that?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
Yeah.
See, it's because it's when society can hoodwink you, and make you think that everything's all right. See, that's the whole thing, is to make you think that everything's all right while all this other shit is happening.
Mm-hmm.
While the gap between the rich and poor grows, while people are struggling from day to day to day to try to survive, to try to feed their kids, everything is fine. We can go buy a nice home and life will be fine and we'll live happily ever after. You can, go follow Taylor Swift or go follow Beyonce, whatever, And so I try to pass this message on to young people. Don't be hoodwinked. Don't be blindsided. Don't be blindfolded. And I tell them in front of their teachers, I said, don't trust everything your teachers tell you. In fact, go pick up a book, Lies My Teacher Told Me. Mm-hmm. I tell these to these kids so that they can go see the truth, because they need to understand the truth. If they don't see the truth, then they're going to be duped.
Yeah.
So I think that young people today, they need to look at how you can lift up these young people and make sure that they're educated before they become, brainwashed, because the system will brainwash them into thinking everything's all right. Everything's okay. Just get a good job, go to school. But there's always this underclass. There's always the underclass that is going to be left out, because they're the ones that are going to serve the rich. Mm. That's what capitalism has racism in its foundation. Mm-hmm. Capitalism is racist to its core. That's what built this country, was the racism that allowed slavery to happen, because it was free labor. And see, people don't understand that. They don't understand. They haven't done their research. So the thing that I tell people today is the same thing that we were told by Chairman Bobby: is read, understand what's going on and what has happened. If you don't understand what's happening in the bigger picture, you're going to get duped. You're going to be led down the wrong path. You need to understand history. You need to understand how this whole thing got to the point where it is. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what's going to happen down the road. I know I'm going to continue to talk to young people, and I'm going to try to continue to inspire them to be young freedom fighters. And I tell these groups, I tell these kids, that I talk to high school students, middle school students, grade school students. I tell them there's nothing wrong with being a freedom fighter. A freedom fighter means that you are standing up for yourself and others around you. And I tell them to love each other. And so this message is about loving humanity, because if it's one thing, and my brother, this is a quote from my brother, it's one thing that a revolutionary detests, it's the oppression of people, anybody. Detest oppression. I cannot look at what's going on in the Middle East and not detest what is happening to the Lebanese and the Palestinians. Yes, there are Jews that are sympathetic to the Palestinian movement. This is not about anti-Jewish. It's not about anti-Semitic. See, this is what the oppressor will have you believe. Oh, you say something against Israel, you're anti-Semitic. Bullshit. This is about standing up for freedom. But there are so many people that are duped.
Yeah.
So many people that are duped. So
yeah. The truth is only scary to the liar. Who will be afraid or upset that people are awakening to the truth unless you con in and lie.
That's right.
So the Black Panther Party was that image, that representation of fearlessness, that representation of self-sufficiency, protecting ourselves and all of that. It inspired all of us growing up, in the time I was growing up. But what really seemed to put fear in the establishment was that the Black Panther Party came up in the reality that's created for the oppressed. See each other in colors, all of that. But then it somehow used that and then grew out of that. Hey, we won't allow ourselves to be confined by those colors. Everybody here is oppressed. Just because you maybe oppress us the most, we're not about to cut ourselves off from the next people who you also oppressing, when we can now join our numbers and have more power. And that really seemed like what shook the system. Like, whoa, we got to stop this. And they're stopping each other from killing each other, and they're even working with the people that we already pre-authorized were supposed to be their enemies for life. That's a problem. We have to really infiltrate this and stop this. But knowing that this system has functioned on oppression, it started on oppression, capitalism is about racism and all of that. The police system, the police force even started as slave catchers. How do you really, this is what I mean by genuinely, do you really think that we can continue with these kinds of things that started like they started, and we'll be able to change them? Is there hope in that?
Yeah. I'll tell you, at my core, I believe that it has to be dismantled. And how that comes about, I think that eventually the system's going to dismantle itself. I don't think they're going to be able to sustain it. I was talking to you earlier about how Seattle seems to be more lawless now. And it's not just Seattle. And so the oppressors, and you see it firsthand out of the Republicans, but it's not about Republicans and Democrats. But you see them firsthand, pitting, the immigration, and telling lies about immigrants, and even, making immigrants, mad against Black people. The whole divide and conquer thing is still continuing.
So yeah,
and so, but at some point, I've got, not only do I have grandkids who are grown, I have great grandkids.
Oh wow!
And I've got 8 great grandkids, and so at some point when I think about my life, and the fact that I'm 74, who knows if God willing, I might live to, my mother's 99. Okay. We've got several centurions. I might live that long, I might not. But I know that young people, my great grandkids, your kids, other people's kids, they have to have some hope for the future. They have to have some hope, but some crazy shit's about to happen. Because all great empires come to an end, and this one will.
And one that started on so much hate.
Started on so much hate.
How will it fall?
But you know, and I got to believe that at some point that good is going to overcome evil. I just have to put my faith in that good is going to overcome evil. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I know that my role is to make sure that I leave my other comrades, that we leave an imprint, a blueprint, you know, and that blueprint is finding commonality while maintaining your own culture, but finding some commonality. That's the work that I do as a D&I consultant. But we're building in Seattle an interpretive center. We're not calling it a museum. It'll be the first of its kind. Black Panther Party, we haven't got the official name of it, what we're calling it, Interpretive Center and Research Center. And so it'll have the elements of a museum, but more interpretive, meaning that people will be able to interact with the exhibits. That's why we traveled to 11 Black museums initially across the country, and then narrowed it down to the top 4. And we took our leadership team there in June to Debasah, to the Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, to the new International Civil Rights Museum in Charlotte, South Carolina, Charlottesville, or Charleston, South Carolina, and also then in Montgomery, Alabama, to the Legacy Museum, to show them what we're going to build here, but that's going to be interactive, and it's going to be primarily aimed at younger people, where there's a research center where they can come and read about past revolutionary movements, not just the Black Panther Party, and dissect it and pull it apart and study and talk and gather, so that they can build. You asked earlier about building revolutionary movements, so that they can build something that is sustainable, and by learning from how we succeeded and where we in fact had our failures, learn from those things as well as other revolutionary movements. And I think by leaving that behind, that's a legacy that we want to leave behind. We have to keep alive the legacy, the true legacy of the Black Panther Party, one that is not distorted by others who didn't live it, but by those of us that lived it and understood it, and understood what was happening, and understood, you know, the before and the after, so that they've got some blueprint for going forward. And if we can leave that behind, and because in fact we're working with other comrades. I met with 2 of my comrades, one of whom you may have seen at Debasah with me, who served in the Black Panther Party both in Chicago and in central headquarters as I did. My brother spent the last years of his life as a Panther at central headquarters, but that we served together. But we're trying to inspire them to do the same kind of interpretive center in Chicago. We're working with a brother in New Orleans to put one in New Orleans. We'll be talking to some brothers and sisters in New York City to put one in New York, so that young people have these places where they can go to and learn, and inspire them to come for whatever is coming next, because it's coming. And so, yes, I believe it has to be dismantled. How it's going to be dismantled, I don't know. I don't know if you saw that movie Civil War, but if you haven't, you should go check it out. Okay. Because it's a dismantling of and kind of putting back together. But I believe that that's what will happen. It will have to be dismantled, because the foundations of, you know, there are a lot of things that are good in this country, that a lot of things that have evil foundations to them. Yeah. How it's going to shake out, I don't know, because this is a very violent world that we live in. There are some very evil people that are in power. There are people that are in power that, you know, that don't appear to be evil on the surface, but don't have the intentions of the people at heart, pretending to be, to have people's intentions. Yes. And so we have to step outside of this, the corruptness in this country. You know, as much as I you know, when I register to vote, I register as an independent. And as much as I, you know the shortcomings of, Democrats that are trying to get in office. If you let that great deceiver back in the office, all hell's going to break loose, and he may get in, and it may be what's needed to shake this place up. I don't know, but all I know is that I have to continue to be there for young people, and to try to educate them, try to prepare them, try to make sure that they pull the rug back, pull the covers off, and not be duped. That's the key, is to make sure they are not duped and that they can commit themselves to a better future.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on today, Elder, and we appreciate the lifetime of hard work, effort, and sacrifices that you and your brother put in, that many of us benefited from. We, especially us, especially the one to my right, who, when you met her, she was damn near hyperventilated. We see the influence, and we are trying to take serious that whatever next chapter we're supposed to be a part of. And I know for us, cultural identity is a big part of it, because we can see that this place has to fall. So it's better we invest in who we want to be instead of what we want to overtake. And right. So I really do appreciate your words, your stories today. Like she said, we would love to have you on again. We would love to continue to listen to you, but you gave us a lot of writing, so we'll go and read first. And I want to let all of our readers know, go and get Elder Elmer Dixon's book, Die Standing, from the Black Panther Revolutionary to Global Diversity Consultant, because as you can see, he has a world of stories, a world of experience to lend to anyone coming up with the heart of a freedom fighter, seeing that they must, fight against oppression, however it looks and whoever it's upon. So we thank you. We thank you for that heart that you've had, that you've given to the people, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We look forward to hearing more about the Interactive Museum too, especially since it's right there.
You know how to reach me, and we'll be sending out that information. And if you want to have me back on, just let me know. And I want to say to your listeners, all power to the people. It's about building power in communities across this country and around the globe that are being oppressed by systems like the one here in this country and around the world. So stand up for freedom, because the struggle continues. All power to the people.
Appreciate it.
All power to the people.
People.